A single strike has set the Middle East on edge tonight. Israeli jets crossed into Syrian skies and launched precision attacks on what they claimed was an Iranian weapons depot. Fires lit up the Damascus night. Within minutes, Tehran denounced the operation as an act of war, and now, the world holds its breath. Because this isn't just another raid. This isn't just another clash in a long and bloody history. This is different. The timing, the target, the response, all of it points to something bigger. The question now is not whether Iran will respond. The question is how. And if that response drags in the United States, NATO, and maybe the entire world. Welcome to Red Alert Zone, where we cut through the noise and show you the signals that matter. According to multiple regional reports, Israel struck deep into Syrian territory, targeting a logistics hub that intelligence sources say was funneling weapons from Iran to Hezbollah. Explosions ripped through the facility, sending plumes of fire into the night sky. Dozens of casualties are reported, militia members, but also civilians living nearby. For Israel, this was a necessary defensive action. For Iran, it was nothing less than a provocation designed to test its resolve. Within hours, Iranian state TV broadcast speeches from military commanders. Their message: retaliation is coming. Hezbollah in Lebanon declared that its resistance will not remain silent. US bases in Iraq and Syria quietly raised their alert levels, knowing full well they are now potential targets. And European diplomats scrambled to prevent what could become the spark for a far wider war. Let's pause and be clear. This is not routine. Israel has struck Iranian assets before, but this one is different because it hits closer to Tehran's core interests. This wasn't about Gaza or a random skirmish. This was about Iran's supply chain, its regional influence, and its credibility as a power. By targeting a node in that system, Israel forced Iran into a corner. If Tehran fails to act, it risks looking weak in the eyes of its allies and adversaries alike. If it acts too strongly, it risks igniting a war it cannot control. This is the moment where choices matter. And history tells us that choices made under pressure often set events spiraling out of control. So here's where we stand. Israel has struck. Iran is promising retaliation. Hezbollah and other proxies are signaling readiness. US forces are on alert. Each of these signals by itself is serious, but together they form a dangerous pattern. A pattern that points toward escalation. And that raises the central question. If Tehran fires back, does America enter the war? If Iran chooses to retaliate, it has more than one battlefield to choose from. Unlike Israel, which must operate directly and visibly, Tehran has built an entire network of options. It doesn't need to send missiles from its own soil to make its point. It can fight through shadows, proxies, choke points, and even keyboards. Option 1. Proxy war. The most likely response is through proxies. Hezbollah in Lebanon remains the crown jewel of Iran's deterrent strategy. With over 100,000 rockets stockpiled, it could unleash a barrage across Israel's northern border in a matter of hours. The Iron Dome and David's Sling systems are powerful, but they cannot intercept thousands of rockets at once. A heavy Hezbollah response would force Israel to fight on two fronts, stretching its defenses thin and raising the possibility of civilian casualties in northern cities. Beyond Hezbollah, Iraq and Syria host a constellation of Iranian-backed militias. Groups like Qatar, IB Hezbollah and Asa IB al-Haq have access to drones and short-range missiles. A single strike on a US base in Iraq or Syria could kill American troops and force Washington to respond militarily, even if Iran itself did not fire the weapon. This is the genius and danger of proxy warfare. Tehran can claim plausible deniability, but everyone knows where the orders came from. The Houthis in Yemen are another wild card. They have already demonstrated their ability to strike Saudi oil facilities and international shipping lanes in the Red Sea. If they widen their attacks to include Israeli ports like Eilat or even US naval assets in the region, the escalation becomes global overnight. Imagine a US destroyer under fire from missiles launched by a group operating thousands of miles from Tehran, but armed, funded and trained by Iran. Option 2. The oil choke point. The second option is economic warfare through the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow stretch of water, only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, carries nearly a fifth of the world's oil supply. Every day, tankers pass through carrying crude from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE. Iran has repeatedly threatened to close the strait if its security is challenged. Even without a full blockade, Iran can make life miserable for shipping. Swarming small boats, sea mines, drone attacks, and harassment by the Revolutionary Guard. Navy could raise insurance rates so high that shipping companies hesitate to sail. The ripple effect would be immediate. Oil prices spike, global markets panic, and families in America feel it at the gas pump within days. It's not just oil. Liquefied natural gas from Qatar also passes through the strait. Disruption there would squeeze Europe, already vulnerable after years of energy instability. For Iran, this isn't just about hurting Israel. It's about applying pressure to the entire West. Option 3. Cyber retaliation. The third option is the cyber domain. Iran's hackers have grown more sophisticated in recent years, targeting US banks, utilities, and even municipal governments. In a major conflict, Tehran could order cyber strikes that disrupt financial systems, shut down parts of the power grid, or leak sensitive data to sow panic. Unlike missiles, cyber weapons don't leave clear fingerprints. An attack on Wall Street trading platforms, or on the electronic medical records of a hospital system, could be traced back to Iranian groups. But attribution is always murky. That makes cyber retaliation attractive to Tehran. It can create chaos without crossing a conventional red line that invites massive military retaliation. The dangerous mix. The real danger is that Iran may not choose just one option. It could combine all three. Imagine Hezbollah launching rockets at northern Israel, Houthis targeting Red Sea shipping, militias striking a US base in Iraq, and Iranian hackers disrupting US financial systems. All in the same week. This would overwhelm Israel, test Washington's resolve, and shake global confidence. For Israel, such a scenario would mean fighting on multiple fronts, something its military planners dread. For the United States, it would mean immediate pressure to defend allies, protect bases, and stabilize markets, commitments that could quickly draw it deeper into a war it never sought. And this is why escalation spirals, because once Iran fires back, the US is already part of the equation, whether it wants to be or not. When the first missile is launched, it's a regional story, but when NATO is forced to respond, it becomes a global one. NATO's dilemma: if Israel is under fire, and US troops in Iraq or Syria are targeted, the pressure on NATO skyrockets. Article 5, the Mutual Defense Clause, is designed for an attack on one of its members. But in the fog of war, what counts as an attack? If Iranian-backed militias strike a NATO base, is that Iran's hand? If oil tankers flagged under NATO countries are attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, does that trigger a collective response? The Baltic states, Poland, and even Germany would demand clarity. They remember how hesitation in the 1930s cost Europe dearly. But countries like Hungary or Turkey might argue against escalation, fearing their own vulnerability. NATO could fracture internally just as the world needs it most. That division alone would embolden Tehran and Moscow, watching closely from the sidelines. America's red line. For Washington, the calculus is brutal. If Americans die in an Iranian-linked attack, the White House cannot stay silent. Retaliation would be demanded by Congress, the Pentagon, and the public. But retaliation where striking Iran directly risks a full-scale war in the Middle East. Limiting strikes to proxies might look weak. The choice is between escalation and humiliation, both of which carry a heavy cost. Meanwhile, the US military machine would kick into high gear. Carrier strike groups already patrol the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf. Reinforcements from Europe could be mobilized within days. Bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait would become critical hubs. But the faster America moves, the more Tehran may feel cornered, and cornered regimes do not act rationally. The economic shockwave: while missiles fly, the world economy bleeds. Oil prices would surge past $150 per barrel in the first week. Airlines grounded, shipping routes rerouted, food and energy inflation spiking. Stock markets tumble as investors panic, and central banks scramble to stabilize currencies. For ordinary Americans, it wouldn't take long to feel the hit. Gasoline prices climbing above $7 per gallon. Supermarket shelves thinner as supply chains seize. Interest rates rising again as governments struggle to borrow in chaos. It wouldn't just be another Middle East war. It would hit wallets, homes, and jobs across the United States and Europe within days. And don't underestimate the psychological shock. Families who never thought about geopolitics suddenly realize that a drone strike in the Persian Gulf means a blackout at home or an empty gas station down the street. That fear spreads faster than any missile. The nuclear shadow hovering over every move is the nuclear question. Iran does not yet have a deployed nuclear weapon, but its program is advanced enough to terrify planners. Israel has long followed the begin doctrine: never allow an adversary in the region to acquire nukes. If the conflict escalates far enough, some analysts warn that Israel could even consider preemptive strikes on nuclear facilities, or worse, signaling its own nuclear deterrent. The US and NATO would then be forced to manage not only a conventional war, but also the unthinkable, a crisis where nuclear threats are exchanged openly. Even if no bomb is dropped, the mere perception that one could be changes everything. Markets collapse, governments panic, civilians lose trust. The world edges closer to midnight. The global picture: Russia and China would not stay idle. Moscow benefits from US distraction in the Middle East, freeing its hands in Ukraine. Beijing, meanwhile, could use the moment to increase pressure on Taiwan, calculating that Washington cannot fight on two fronts. In other words, a war sparked by an Israeli strike and an Iranian retaliation could open the door to a truly global confrontation, a chain reaction across multiple continents. Closing warning: this is why analysts warn that what looks like a local strike can become the match that lights the global firestorm. Israel may hit first. Iran may retaliate through proxies or cyberattacks. NATO may stumble into unity or division. America may face the hardest red line of all: how many US lives does it take before retaliation is unavoidable? And at the center of it all, ordinary families in Tel Aviv, in Tehran, in New York, would be left asking, how close are we to the edge? This isn't fear-mongering, it's the cold math of escalation. In war, perception is reality, and once momentum builds, leaders lose control. The question for the world tonight is simple: can the brakes still be pulled? Or are we watching the opening act of World War III? Stay informed, stay prepared.